Hello, everybody. Segment 2 of the Victimhood episode. This is going to be different. I will be having with me Herbert Kay, and those of you who watch at JLenardDetroit behind the scenes sneak peek on YouTube or Rumble can see I like to do these segue / introductions of guests with the guest on the line so that we're not just going cold. And then also those of you who know me through either my thelibertybeacon.com writings or beforeitsnews.com writings or any of my dozen plus social media platforms know I can't resist bad puns, jokes, and gags. So I've got to say, because of Herbert Kay, the jewelry ad, every kiss begins with K. No, there will be no jewelry exchange or makeout session happening today.
I wished I was that K.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so seriously, let's hear what Herbert Kay is about and indeed why he is here. Welcome to the show, Herbert Kay.
It's a pleasure, and call me Herbie. No one calls me Herbert.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I took a lot of ribbing. You know, Jewish people, I'm Jewish. Jewish people name their children after dead relatives, generally speaking. There's no such thing as a Jewish junior. You know, you'd never see John Smith Jr. or, you know, Arthur Goldstein Jr. That would never happen. So I'm named after a dead uncle, and the name Herbert when you're a kid is a tough name.
Yeah,
and it rhymes with sherbet, and it rhymes with pervert, and so I don't use it. It's Herbie. You can now I think it's cute, but then I didn't think it was so cute.
Well, that brings to mind Disney and the Love Bug. But anyway,
oh God, have I been called the Love Bug? I've lost track how many times I've been called Love Bug.
But you know what? I never thought about Jewish lineage in that way. Yeah. No juniors, seniors, or seconds in the third, and
never.
It never dawned on me. I never thought of it, never questioned it until you just brought it up. But
learn something new every day.
Exactly.
Learn something new every day.
And that's why I'm happy to have guests. And people might actually be surprised. Another guest, as my opening of my show always says, occasional guest, because I didn't expect to have guests in my first season. And, it's a great opportunity that people are willing to come on this humble show in the first season. Absolutely. Why would I turn that down? Right?
The way I look at it is, do you know what the 6 degrees of separation are?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we're all separated by 6 degrees. For the people listening, let's say that let me name somebody. Let's say Vladimir Putin, God forbid. Buddy, who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's what degrees of separation. So my feeling is, I do any podcast, modest or big, it doesn't really matter, because it only takes one person to know another person to say this guy's interesting, and the next thing you know, boom. So, I'm just like you. I'm enthusiastic, big, small, or in between. I don't care.
We have the same philosophy. I take the same philosophy about being a guest on shows to talk about my books, whether it be Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You, how to write a book and get it published, or my current ChristiTutionalist Politics. Absolutely. Why turn down an opportunity? And
exactly,
because you never know who indeed will hear it. But anyway, so why are you here? Why would anybody care about Herbie?
Well, whether they care about me or not is fine. I'm not here for personal aggrandizement. So quickly for your audience, just so they understand my background, did you watch the video on the website on 1964plan.org? Have you watched the video?
No.
Okay,
I'm
so you don't
not
know.
going to blow smoke here and say I did when I didn't. I didn't
Got
watch
it.
it. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so there's a website called the 1964plan.org. We are, and myself and a bunch of other people are a 501c3 charity. I'm not charity, nonprofit, sorry. And they're really synonymous. If you were to donate money to us, you can tax deduct it. We're a C3, not a C4. And the reason we're a C3 is because we are apolitical. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or whatever you are. This, you can talk politics if you want to, but it's not. I think it's a dirty business. What can I say? Speaking of dirty business, let's talk about the worst thing about me. So if people Google, they're going to find out anyway. So I might as well tell you. So from oh no, well it isn't but it was a transformative experience, which you as a Christian will understand. So from the time I've had a very interesting life, and I've done so many different things that it almost sounds like I'm making it up. I was a Russian linguist at the National Security Agency. I've been a sailor. I've been in the insurance business. I've been a venture capitalist. I've been a venture lender. I've been a paid speaker. I've been a TV personality. I've been a talking head on the networks. I've been, what else have I done? Oh, I'm a best-selling author. I wrote a bestseller in 1999, speaking of getting published. And I have a new one, hold on, that I haven't put out yet, but this will be the next book. Whoops. This is called, I don't know if you can, well, I don't know if it's going to focus. It's called The Grand Master. And anyway, it's an intrigue, kind of an intrigue novel.
Yeah, you've got your settings set to blur your background, so
yeah, I know. I don't have a fancy background. I don't have anything.
I finally got a green screen, so yeah, I could use.
It looks great, but for me, I'm a simple man. My last business, I was a real estate developer, and not only was I a real estate developer, I was a real estate developer in Mexico, which is a whole different ball of wax. And yes, I speak Spanish in addition to Russian and German and French. In my family, foreign language runs. My mother, God rest her soul, had a degree, a major in Spanish, a minor in French. When I was a little boy, she worked at Miami. I was born in Miami Beach. She was born at Miami Beach. She worked at Miami Beach Savings Loan as a bilingual teller. I spoke Spanish before I spoke English because our housekeeper was Cuban and she didn't speak English. And my mother spoke Spanish to her and she spoke Spanish to me, which comes in handy. It comes in handy because I live in Arizona and I live in Phoenix. And if you don't love Latino culture, don't live here. This is a majority Latino state. I love Mexican culture. I love it. But some people do, some people don't. Anyway, so in the crash of 2008, I went down with the ship, and in trying to save the company, I broke the law. There's just no doubt about it. I did. And I don't weasel about it, and I don't get into explanations, and I don't get into explaining what happened or context. And the reason that I don't do that is because it's all going to sound like weaseling. And I'm just not going to do it. I did it. It's the worst thing in my life. And if you choose to judge me by the worst thing I've ever done at the worst possible time in my life, then okay. There's nothing I can do about that.
You've come to the right show. ChristiTutionalist Politics, Christian-based constitutionalism. And part of that is redemption, right? We are all
but
sinners.
redemption can only come.
Mistakes. You have to admit it. Exactly. And you're being honest, and we are about dealing with reality and being honest here. Yep.
I did it. And I'm not going to explain anything else about it because everything's going to sound like weaseling. And I'm not a politician, and I'm not going to run for office, and I'm not going to start weaseling. Okay, I'm just not going to do it. This one of the things I can't stand about politicians. They can't answer a question. But anyway, by the way, I don't know if you see my shirt. It says "Stop electing morons."
Yeah. Oh, great. That's great. Yeah. That's great. But I said, hey, it's an opportunity. I'll have anybody on. Well, that's that's a little white lie. Obviously, if you're here to talk jigsaw puzzles or Jenga, no. But if you remotely relate to the show, and this show is often based off of my thelibertybeacon.com pieces, and anyone could go to thelibertybeacon.com, put Joseph M. Leonard in the search field, and especially find the piece called "Duh, should be an awakening moment for the left, but won't be. regarding crime, coddling
Well, let's talk
criminals,
about
and
let's
letting
talk
them
about
back
crime.
out. And that's why you're here.
I'm here because unusual, I've been at the very top. I was very wealthy. I've owned four airplanes. I'm also a licensed pilot. That's another thing I've done. I flew my own airplanes. I lived in big houses. I had boats, all of that. And then I crashed all the way to the bottom and got a view of a part of our culture and society that people like me don't see. You can't learn what I've learned in a sociology class. And so because I was surrounded by thousands, literally over the course of the 5 years I wasn't in totally 5 years, but about 4.5, that I was there, I met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and I met them personally because those boys, almost all of those boys, men, come from fatherless backgrounds. About 99%, I'm not exaggerating when I say 99% of them. And they want a father. So I became what is called in prison a yard dad because I was an older guy and, I wasn't a gangster. A lot of these young men, but I was always straight with them. Like if they were being stupid, I would look right in the eye and tell them you're being stupid. And I get along with all the races. In prison, prison is segregated. Now it's not segregated by the corrections officers, it's segregated by the inmates themselves.
Self-selection, yes.
Yeah, so there's the white, the whites are called the Woods, which is short for Peckerwood. I don't know why they like that name, but they do. The black people are called the kinfolk. The Native Americans are called the chiefs. The Mexicans and Latin Americans who come from out of the country, they're not American citizens, they're the paisas. Paisa in Spanish means country. They're the paisas. And then there's the Chicanos, which are the American Mexicans, and those two groups hate each other, okay? They don't really mix. And the reason they don't mix is the way that the Chicanos speak Spanish. They speak Spanglish. They throw a lot of English in with their Spanish. And the Mexicans and Latin Americans, El Salvadorans, Guatemalans, that kind of thing, Hondurans, they don't tolerate that.
Well, same way an Oxford English speaker from the UK doesn't like our American English. Yeah.
Well, I speak Cuban Spanish, which really drove them crazy because I dropped the ends off of my words, but that's another story. So anyway, but I did, because I speak Spanish, I was well integrated in the community. I got along especially well with the kinfolk, with the black guys. I don't know why, but I seem to identify with them. And what was interesting was I was very straight with those folks. We'll get into that in just a minute. So because of that experience and that exposure, it came to me that to earn my redemption, and by the way, another thing about Judaism that I don't know if you know this, so Christianity, and by the way, I'm well read in Christianity. It interests me. I'm obviously living in a Christian-dominated country. I'm very comfortable with it. I've spoken before many churches. I've read the Bible, the Christian version of it, what we call the New Testament, but you call it whatever you want. I've read it, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, front to back. And it's not that I could recite, every part of it, but I know what Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John said, and I know what Paul did, and I know what his letters are, and I have a good grasp of Christianity. And Christianity is redemption through faith. Christ died for your sins, accept Christ as your savior, redemption through faith. Jews don't do that. Jews believe in redemption through acts. So you have to, we view life as like a ledger, and you can do bad things and you can do good things, but you got to try to do mostly good things. And on that is Jews are kind of like talk is cheap, just the Jewish point of view. They want to see you do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's not entirely unchristian. I talk all the time. You shall be known by your fruits. Matthew, judge not lest ye be judged. There's more to that scripture. There's 12 others about judging biblically. That includes remove the log from your own eye. So,
well, Jesus was an Orthodox Jew.
Your acts do matter. I'm sorry, fellow Christians, if that upset you, but I knew a lot
of jailhouse Christians that the minute they walked out the door, they dumped their Bible, but that's another story. I knew a lot of sincere guys too that found Christ in prison too, and there were a lot of ministries going on within prison. But I don't want to. That's digression. So with the knowledge that I gained, and especially I gained a special knowledge of the drug cartels. And the reason I gained the special knowledge is that those guys were in prison too, and they were the smartest guys there, intellectually speaking, and they were an interesting conversation. And they're not like, it's not like the movies. They're not walking around with blood dripping off their fangs. You know, they're just people. The reason that they're so violent, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but the reason there's so much violence in the drug business is because it's illegal. And since it's illegal, they can't go to court. So when they do business with anybody, it's on a handshake. There are no contracts in the drug business. Consequently, if you don't live up to your side of the bargain, their only alternative is violence. So that, just to understand the context, these people are not psychopaths. They don't walk around thinking of how can we kill everybody we see. I mean, that makes good movies, but that's not, and no one would work for them if everybody got killed. Most people work for them, and it's like anything else. It's a huge enterprise run by smart people, really, very smart people, because let's be honest, our police are basically bureaucrats with guns. And they are not at the same level that these drug people are. They're just not.
Well, and that's why they're called crime families for a reason. Even non-family, they try to treat as family because for no other reason, you've got to try to breed loyalty within.
They treat their people well, generally speaking. They make a tremendous amount of money. And the point I want to make about that is the drug war was lost from the day it was started. There's no chance, zero, no matter how many times you hear them go on, politicians, we need to put them in prison, we need to lock them up, we need to do this, we need to do that. Baloney. We will never, ever, ever stem the flow of drugs. And so anyway, let me go back to what I'm doing, and I'll talk about it. So what I did when I got out is I never want to touch money again. So when I formed this nonprofit, I am not on the board of directors. There's an independent board of directors, and I am not an officer by choice. I'm not president or vice president, none of that. I don't see the money. I don't handle the money. I don't look at the organization. There are other people that do that. All I do is what I'm doing now. I am the face and the creator of the 1964 plan, but I do not manage it because I just don't even want the appearance of money around me again.
Yeah. Well, I don't script, but I do take notes. And what intrigued me the most is, to segue into that, is the plan will return us not back to the past, but the way we face the future in the past, justice, courage, moderation, and wisdom based upon objective reality. And that's part of the problem here, this unicorn fart delusion that if we just give criminals enough hugs, there will be no more crime.
The 1964 plan is a plan to not end. First of all, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. Okay. Now, I didn't make that up. That's from Thomas Sowell, who's my favorite economist. And Thomas Sowell said that, and it's true. When someone says this will solve the problem, all they're doing is replacing one set of side effects with another. And the question is, if you're going to go a different route, what are the trade-offs for that route? So I will explain the trade-offs. You'll understand them as I go into the 1964 plan. The 1964 plan is a specific, detailed plan to take crime to where it was in 1964. Now, the reason I picked that year, 1964, is that was the year that the Civil Rights Act was passed. And when the Civil Rights Act was passed, it made all discrimination illegal in the United States, thank God. Now, that doesn't mean that there still isn't discrimination. That doesn't mean there still isn't battles to fight, but it's against the law to discriminate in the United States. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, we talk a lot, I don't talk a lot about it, but the people do in the country, racism, 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 racism. They put end racism. Racism is a thought crime, okay? Discrimination is an act. It is illegal to discriminate. What you think is a waste of effort. Riding it in the end zone of a football game is not going to change the minds of people who are racist.
And I hate to break it to people, we are free to hate if we want. You just can't physically act on that hate. And you are free to spew your hate if you want. You just can't act against other people's rights on that hate.
I'm a Jew. I've experienced anti-Semitism firsthand in my life many, many times. I've had I grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. They were teaching in catechism until 1964 that the Jews killed Christ. Then Pope Paul changed that. And from that day forward, they don't teach that anymore in Catholic catechism. But believe me when I tell you, in the Irish Catholic neighborhood I grew up in, they were anti-Semitic. And it was not all. I had lots of good friends, not even the majority. But I certainly experienced anti-Semitism and have all my life here and there. But you know what?
Yeah.
Let me tell you how Jews deal with this. And this will become relevant as we go into this. Jews' attitude towards discrimination is find a way and screw them. Okay, now I cleaned that up. Okay, but we don't, the difference between us and other persecuted minorities, and the reason Jews are so successful, is that we expect it. And we just really don't pay any attention to it.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, if that's what they're going to do, they're going to hate us. Okay, don't do business with them. Find a different way to do it. You know, go a different way. Just you're beating your head against the wall to deal with to try to change.
I certainly didn't expect to go down this road, but you know, Martin Luther King Jr., content of character, right? That's individualism versus collectivism, and this show speaks out against that. I don't care what group you belong to, you are not defined by that group entirely. Now, certainly to a degree, but not entirely. Your specific content of character is what has to matter. Exactly right. You know, to see and blame all Jews. Now, again, a road I didn't expect to go down. Some Jews certainly have aided and abetted in the resulting death of Christ. Does that mean you blame all Jews for the death of Christ? No, that's stupid.
That's blood libel. Blood libel is something that's Nazi crap, frankly, is blood libel. You know, if you're 1/8 a Jew, you go to the concentration camp. I mean, that's just it's ridiculous. And we are by far the most persecuted people in history. There's no one that even comes close. Black people slavery ended 170 years ago. The Holocaust ended in 1945. So let's be clear. And no one there have been about 4,400 lynchings in the United States, all bad. But that's not 6 million Jews. Okay, right. I'm sorry. It just isn't.
And in those lynchings by the demo KKK rats, it was black and white and every shade in between of Republicans that opposed the Democrats who were the slaveholders. So,
they were.
So slavery goes way back. And
race issues in this country go way back.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, to the moment the bullet went through his brain, planned to send the black people after they were freed back to Africa. That was the Lincoln plan. He believed that black people were equal to white people. He just didn't think that the cultures could ever mix. So his plan, seriously, that's what Liberia is. Liberia, the reason it has American-sounding names like Monrovia is the capital, James Monroe, is it was created for that specific reason. But, you know, listen, I'm glad the black people stayed. I'm just telling you historic, interesting trivia. This is an old problem. It's not going to solve. But what's interesting is you and I are old enough to remember, and then I want to get back to the 1964 plan. But you and I are old enough to remember when we would go into a restaurant, if there was a mixed race couple, everybody would stare. I know you remember that clearly. And today, really, who cares? And today, who cares? You don't even notice it anymore. And, you know, racism has gotten much better in this country. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
And
although you know, I got to say, the season 1, episode 20, that this will become part of, as I said, the title is Victimhood. And again, another road I didn't expect us really to go down to. But that whole article at thelibertybeacon.com that associates with this corresponding episode is indeed, there are still some people, though, that have to feel they're the victim. The whole article is on a black woman at the local Big Boy, and the young white waitress says to her, "Would you like to sit around the back?" Oh, of course, it's gotta be because she's black. If you're looking for victimhood, you're going to bleeping find it under every rock. right?
That's true.
The same waitress said the same thing to the person before
But
because
a
we're
lot of that in
dealing
the
with
Black
COVID
community.
hysteria again. So they're
Okay, so
spreading
let me bring
people
this
out.
Let me bring this around. This is a good place to segue into the 1964 plan. We have 4.25% of the world's population in the United States. We have 340 million people. That's about 4.25% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prison population. We imprison more people than North Korea, China, and Russia combined. Okay, and that falls very heavily on the Black community and the Latino community, mostly. And because of that, it's so disproportionate, you can understand their point of view. Okay, whether you agree with it or not, it is so disproportionate. Now, what's interesting, and this is how we get into the 1964 plan, we deal with the causes of crime and violence, not the correlations. Politicians deal with correlation, and you have to understand the difference between a cause and a correlation. Okay, so drugs correlate with crime, they do not cause crime. Drug laws cause crime. Okay, and drug laws cause crime because it's a prohibition. And there's never been a successful prohibition in the history of mankind. It's never been successfully done. Whenever a country tries to ban, when a lot of people want something, they're going to have it, regardless of whether you want to give it to them or not. And ironically, first of all, I know exactly how drugs are smuggled into this country, which I'm not going to share, only because, first of all, I did write it in a white paper. If you read the white paper on drug policy that's on my website, you will see exactly how they bring the drugs into this country. They're not going to get caught. Not going to get caught. I'll give you one good example. The Border Patrol is completely infiltrated by the drug cartels. They've been raising children for decades to literally volunteer, sign up, become Border Patrolmen that come from trusted families. The entire thing is infiltrated. It just is. And you can believe that or not, but it is. When I was in prison at the Kingman prison yard, the cartel was doing $3.5 million a year in drug sales inside prison. And how the prison, I know that because they kept trying to get me to launder their money, which I wouldn't do, but don't do the crime if you can't do the time. I was one and done. I was never going to do that again. I'd be a very rich guy if I said yes, but not worth it. But, I got to be friendly with them and I know how it's all done. And I'll tell you how they come in the prison yard. In movies, it's like shoved up people's rear ends and, things like that. There's too many drugs for that. There's not enough rear ends in the world for the amount of drugs in prison. How it comes in today is by drone. So when the prison yard is locked down, the cartel flies the drugs in on a drone. And a corrections officer, which most of them are corrupt, they make very little money and they're infiltrated as well. One of them picks it up, takes it to the paisas, to the head guys, and they distribute it around the prison yard. Okay. And if you can't stop the drug trade in prison, you're not going to stop it on the street. Just let's get a grip on reality here. Okay. Drugs do not cause crime. Drug laws cause crime. The other thing that's common that causes crime is single parent families, which is going to be something near and dear to your heart. The destruction of the traditional nuclear family is at the core of the 1964 plan. Now, why did the nuclear family destruct not only in the Black community, but in the Latino community, the white community? The only community that hasn't really been hurt by it so much is the Asian community. Side note, if this were a racist country, how come Asians make more money than white people on average? I mean, that wouldn't be possible in a racist country. But anyway, let's not go there.
Stop confusing people with reality.
Yeah, I know. Well, I only deal in reality. But I'm an objectivist, and objectivists are very much into reality. Those four things you mentioned, by the way, moderation, wisdom, courage, and justice, those are the four pillars of Stoicism. And the reason that I blended that with objectivism to form the 1964 plan is because of the alarming drop in religiosity in the United States. It is a very bad thing that people aren't going to church. Now, look, I'm no Christian, but the fact that church attendance has been dropping for years, and the people who identify as atheists, it's as if we've kicked over, it's as if we were walking across a field and we would come to a fence and we'd say, oh, that's in our way, and we'd kick it over without ever asking the most important questions, which is, why was the fence there? Who put the fence up? And is it protecting us or holding us in? And the traditional nuclear family was protecting us, and kicking it over was an enormous mistake. And here's how we did it. The first way we did it is we made divorce no fault in all 50 states. Ronald Reagan signed the first no-fault divorce law in 1969 in California. He said it was the greatest mistake of his life, okay? Because once you make divorce no fault, you make marriage nothing more than another long-term relationship that you can easily get out of. Marriage has to be a contract with God and a legal contract that you can't get out of without tremendous difficulty, because particularly, not so much if you're single, without children, but the moment you have a child as a parent, what a lot of people don't seem to understand culturally is it's not about you anymore. Okay, now I have 4 children, by the way, and grandchildren on top of that and everything else. But I have to tell you, when you become a parent, it's not about you anymore. But we're in a me culture. And so no fault divorce was number one. Number 2 reason that the nuclear family was destroyed was the birth control pill. The birth control pill became legal in 1961, and it changed if you had to pick one event that changed our entire culture, that's it. It's one of those things that people never think about. But, and by the way, I didn't make this up. There are a lot of serious academic papers on this subject. This isn't something I cooked up in my head. Think about it. Okay. Before the birth control pill, girls were mostly very chaste. Most girls married as virgins. Most boys married as virgins. And if they did mess around, the girls they messed around with, they would have never married, because they would have thought of them as a slut and would have never brought them home to their mother. Okay. It was a shameful thing to have sex out of marriage. Yes, people did. Let's not be naive. And there's a lot, I was a teenager and you do all kinds of things, but you refrained from actual sex because, God forbid, you got that girl pregnant. You were going to marry her in those days. They call it a shotgun marriage. And that was the correct thing. I know that's a lot of people. If you have a baby, you're going to have to step up to the plate, young man. That's just all there is to it. Now, girls, that's why the majority, and when you marry as a virgin and then you have an intimate relationship with your wife in the old days, which were better days in this way, it was both parties first or nearly first in the case. I mean, sometimes they went off to war and they came home, but it was their first sexual relationship, and that meant no comparisons. So when women are out there today counting the body count about how many men they've slept with in our culture, they call it body count now. When you know why men are using Viagra at a record pace? Because they're all worried about competing with every other guy that girl slept with. Okay, it destroyed the satisfaction of women. Yale University did a study not long ago that said women are the unhappiest now that they've ever been. Okay, since they've been recording this, women today are deeply unhappy. Yeah. Feminism has let them down. Okay, now I'm all for equal pay for equal work, but we'll get into that in a minute. But a lot of this is.
Well, I'm afraid we're not going to really have time, and it's my fault because I took us down too many other rabbit holes.
Don't even worry about it.
This show only goes 30 to 45 minutes. Normally,
oh, really? Okay.
I can go more. We alone are on 30 minutes. So I hate to do this to you, but what are the exact specifics you want of the project to bring across to this audience before we get another rabbit hole?
Okay, I'm going to lay the plan out in simplicity, and then I'm going to tell you that if you go to the 1964plan.org, I wrote a series of white papers on each of these subjects I'm about to name, one after another, that you can go in and get into all the details. And I wrote them for people to read them. They're not academic. They are footnoted, so that if I make a claim like women are unhappy, I'll footnote the Yale study that I'm referencing. But it's not, this is easy reading. And by the way, I'm funny. I know it doesn't seem that way, but when you read the papers, they're funny. And they're funny because they're blunt. But anyway, so here's the deal. You're going to have some of this plan I'm about to lay out, you're going to hate, because it's a plan. You're going to love parts and you're going to hate parts. And that's what makes it a great plan. If you ever find anything, you go, I love all of that. That's not a plan. That's propaganda. Okay. And a lot of people, what happens is everyone on the right listens to all the news on the conservative channels, Fox and the Daily Wire. And, and by the way, all great. I'm not judging that. And the people on the left, Newsmax, Blaze TV, take your pick. And on the left, they listen to MSNBC and they listen to the Young Turks and they listen to all that stuff. But everybody, the algorithms on social media then only sends you, as you're watching, only what you like to see and hear. So all you do is get bombarded. That's called a cognitive bias, and everybody has cognitive biases. So I'm about to lay this out, and I promise everyone watching, there are parts of this you're going to absolutely hate. Let me start with the one that I think most Christians will hate. We're going to have to legalize drugs. When I say legalize, I don't mean decriminalize. Decriminalize is a code word for replacing the drug lords with a useless bureaucracy. Let me make clear to you that drug addicts know what they're doing, but their goal in life is not longevity. See, this is what you have to understand. And when a person sinks so low as to become a real big drug addict, okay, about 1 out of 10 people that use any drug becomes addicted to it, whether it's alcohol or heroin. About 10% of the population. A lot of people don't understand that. There are 90% of the people could use heroin and never get addicted. For decades before the 1971 Controlled Substances Act, people did opium and all kinds of things and never got addicted. But there are a group of people that use drugs to escape what they consider to be a horrible reality. It's the unprescribed medication of self-loathing, and their goal is not longevity. Their goal is just to get through the day. So the question is, why did we make it illegal? Well, all we've done is make drugs unbelievably expensive. So, for example, the street price of heroin is 20 times more expensive than it needs to be. You could buy heroin as cheaply as aspirin if it were legal. Okay, and what that means is, let me ask you a question, Joe. Can I call you Joe, or you prefer Joseph?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, Joe, have you ever been the victim of any kind of crime? Have you ever had your car broken into, your house broken into?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a 99% chance that was a drug-related crime. Okay, almost everyone in prison. They like to say that only a third of the people in prison are there for drug charges. That's one of those figures lie and liars figures thing. Yes, that's for possession or sale, but almost every robbery, every beating, every assault, you know that virtually 100% of domestic violence is caused by alcohol, the worst drug of all. 100%. Okay, it is. By the way, 80% of domestic violence is committed by women on men. I know that's never brought around because men
Not
understand.
Politically correct.
As a man, you understand that if you hit a woman, you could kill her. So men don't hit women. But men will allow themselves to be hit by women because they really can't hurt you. Unless they bring out a gun, a woman can pound on you all day. She's not going to hurt a man. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Now, having said that, and I realize there are exceptions to every rule, and I'm making broad generalizations and yada, yada,
before you go any further, I don't hate what you're saying, but I have a minor issue with what you're saying. And that is where I think libertarians, I call them libertarians, get it wrong. I would be all for legalization because as a ChristiTutionalist, the federal government and even most states have no right to regulate what you put in your body. However, until we undo the safety hammock.
Oh, well, now you're in the plan again. Let's go back to the plan. Okay. That's part of the plan too. Okay. So we have to legalize drugs because it'll empty the prisons to about 80%. About 80% of the people in prison will not be in prison when drugs are legal. Violent crime will go to nothing. Remember when I told you that all that drug violence is because they can't do a contract and they can't sue in court? In a legalized drug environment, they'll sue. They'd rather go to court than shoot people. It's a lot easier, and you don't go to prison for it. All this violence, the gangs will go away. The money will go out of it. If they could go into Walgreens and buy the heroin, it would be a much better deal for everybody. Now, again, the trade-off is they're going to still be addicts, but it's a health problem, not a criminal problem. Let's take the money. The state of Arizona, where I live, spends $1.1 billion a year on prisons. If drugs were legal, they'd spend $200 million. The other $800 million or so, $900 million, is plenty of money without raising taxes to do first-class rehab for those that want it, okay? And to treat this, and we should have a massive education program, just like we did for smoking, just like we did for littering. You don't have to make bad acts illegal. You have to make the public buy into it, okay? So when you and I were kids, people used to throw stuff out the window all the time. Then they put that Indian chief on and he cried, and everybody saw the ad, and everyone stopped littering. It was really true. When you and I were kids, everybody smoked cigarettes. Today, 70% of the population doesn't. We can accomplish what we want to accomplish to help people without imprisoning them. putting people in prison where they're just going to take more drugs, because that's, I never saw heroin in my life in person until I was in prison. And in prison, I saw it every single day.
So I'm not having a qualm with this plan. It's just the order. Because again,
let's go to 2.
If you get rid of the safety net and you deal with the consequences yourself, yes, legalization.
Okay, so drugs should be legalized. Read the white paper. Second thing that has to happen is we have to end no-fault divorce. No-fault divorce, when you have children, has to become gone. You have to go to court and slug it out the hard way, and divorce has to be a misery because we have to keep families together. Now, the argument that, well, if you're unhappy, it's bad for your children. Look, you're raising your children to be adults. And yes, it's not nice to live in a house where the parents don't like each other, but it's a hell of a lot better than no father. It's not a choice between perfect and imperfect. Virtually, when we were kids, there was no such thing as the word school and shooting was never in the same sentence. Okay.
We took rifles to school with us.
It just never happened. And the reason was we all had fathers. Black people in particular, in 1960, 86% of Black children were born into two-parent families. 86%. Today, over 82% are not. Okay, that explains the poverty in the Black community. That explains the crime.
Yeah, Larry Elder and Candace Owens and a few other Blacks in the community are the only ones willing to talk about it.
Well, Thomas Sowell and there are a lot. John McWhorter and there are a lot. Times are a-changing. So the second thing we have to do after we legalize drugs is, and then after we make no-fault divorce the law, we have to end the federal welfare state. Now, let me explain. I told you I was apolitical. I'm going to sound like I'm right-wing, but I'm not. Here's what I'm going to say. Devolve it to the states and let the states design their own safety net that fits their state. One size does not fit all. Plus, when you administer a social program that's smaller at the state level, it's going to be much more effective and much better run and help more people. And the other reason it's important, which is financial really, is states can't print money. So states can't just let programs go on forever that don't work, like the drug war. Now we're $32 trillion in debt. We've spent over $1 trillion on the drug war and not stopped a thing. You know, let the states, the governor of Wyoming is facing a very different poverty problem than the governor of New York and the governor of California. The governor of Alabama is different from the governor of Washington State. To think that you can have a one-size-fits-all welfare state is insane. Devolve it to the states with the money they're saving states spend money on 3 things: schools, infrastructure, and prisons. If you take away 80% of the prison cost, they'll have plenty of money to run a decent welfare system.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even better yet, devolve it to the synagogues and the churches.
Well, that's the way it used to be.
Charity is a personal commandment, and a local church knows, as Jesus said, the poor will always be among you, because there are always going to be lazy who never aspire to anything but the bare minimum. And the locals know who the needy are versus the scammers.
So I'm not saying the end of the welfare state. I'm saying the end of the federal welfare state.
Yeah.
Now, once that's out of the way, you will see marriages hold together. Instead of people going to prison for drug crime, they can go to either rehab. And now we're going to deal with homelessness. Okay. In the homeless population, about half of them are seriously mentally ill, and all of them are seriously addicted. Virtually all homeless people. And I knew a lot of homeless people in prison. They get locked up too. So I got to know them very, very well. They live on the street by choice. I'm sorry, it's true. The reason they don't go to shelters, the reason they don't go to shelters, the reason they don't like to go to clinics to get other drugs is because they don't like the way that psychic drugs make them feel, and they don't like to be given rules when they want to self-medicate. Most of them are horrible alcoholics. The number one drug of the homeless by far is alcohol. Okay, by far. Alcohol is the most destructive drug times 1,000. Last year, there was 50,000 opiate-related deaths. There were 300,000 alcohol-related deaths. Let's just be clear about that. But, you know, drugs, anyway. So I don't want to keep dwelling on the same subject. Yeah. Okay, so to wrap, if we legalize drugs, get rid of no-fault divorce, devolve the welfare state to the local level. Okay, that's basically the plan in a nutshell. Then we can do rehab and we can get the homeless off the street. The mentally ill, we can build very nice facilities where they can live their lives out quietly and in safety and do what they need to do. And for the ones that are just addicts, outside the city limits with that money, they could build little towns of those little tiny houses, let them go in there and drug themselves into oblivion, and they'll be happy and they won't be on the streets pooping. And yes, that's not a perfect solution, but it beats the heck out of what's going on in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles and Phoenix today, and probably where you live too. And again, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. The trade-off here is we will have the money to segregate the homeless population into a place where they'll be happier. I'm talking about a place where there's no one's going to bother them. If they want rehab, it'll be available. If they want to take treatment, it'll be available. We'll have a clinic on site if one of them overdoses. But really, most of the time, they'll just sit in there. No one knows how to take drugs correctly like an addict, okay? And they'll be getting a lot more pure drugs. Instead of things cut with fentanyl, they'll get properly cut drugs, properly prepared, clean needles in a quiet place, or they can smoke their crack, or they can do their crystal meth, or whatever it might be, in the quiet, or drink themselves to death if that's what they want to do, in the privacy of their own space, off the streets, not hurting other people. That's the goal, and that's how we get the money to do it.
Like I've said in another episode, I talk about movies. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I'm amazed woke Disney of late allowed that movie out, because in it, Rocket says a very ChristiTutionalist or conservative right-wing message. He promised perfection, but he really just hated things the way they were. That's the mantra of every tyrant on the planet. There's no such thing as perfect. So yes, I love your plan. I have an issue with maybe the order, but
there's no order to it. I was just discussing it. It all has to be done basically once. The idea behind the 1964 plan.org, the nonprofit, is to create public support and force politicians to do the right thing. Politicians are never going to stand up themselves, right or left, and ever do the right thing. What they're going to do is take a lot of polls and pander to your cognitive biases, whatever, if you're one of their voters, left or right. By the way, I think progressivism is communism just dressed up again. I'm sorry, I know that's a political statement, but it's a horrible philosophy. It's not.
You fit right in here.
Okay, so, but at the same time, lock them up doesn't work. I mean, the conservatives have been yelling, lock them up. We lock up, like I said, 25% of the world's prison population, and we're a republic. Can you believe that? And we're a teeny little part of the world population. It's ridiculous. It doesn't work. It also doesn't work to do what they're doing and just let them on the street with nothing. Okay. A big part of the 1964 plan, you'll love the part about prison reform and how I reform it and how I separate out the wheat from the chaff. And because every prison sentence is a life sentence, if you think about it. So if you take an 18-year-old kid who's arrested for, let's say, sale of heroin, and he goes in, now he's marked for life. That's it. It doesn't matter if he's serving 1 year or 2 years, and he knows that. He knows he has no future. He knows he'll never do anything but dig ditches, so he goes right back home to sell drugs again. They let him out of prison with no money, no training. They literally leave him on a street corner, literally. And they expect them to be rehabilitated? On what planet would that work?
No, and that's why I support there's a lot more now, finally, better. And you have my support with this, as do the other reform projects that give people.
When you read my prison reform,
come out and learn skills, help ease them back into reality and life, so they don't have to immediately return to crime.
What you have to do is when you first go into prison, they basically rank you based on how dangerous you are and then send you to the prison yard that's appropriate. Okay. Now, what I would do is when you come into prison, I would separate out all the gangsters from everybody else. Now, how do you know there's a gangster? By the ink. It's very easy. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about ink that says the girlfriend's name or the zip code they live in or anything like that. I'm talking about the swastikas and the lightning bolts and the tear. When you see a guy with teardrops, every teardrop is someone they killed.
Yep.
If you see a guy with a war eagle across his chest, he's committed murder. He wouldn't be allowed to wear it. All that ink what we should, when you go into prison, you should be offered a choice. Every inmate should be offered a choice immediately. We will remove your tattoos for free, or you can go to the maximum security yard. It's up to you. Now, the hardcore, the worst of the worst, will never take off their ink. They'll go to that yard, and those are lost souls. We'll just have to, basically, we should lock them up for life. And now we'll have plenty of room to do it. But the rest of the people separated, most people are followers. You get all of those gangsters out of the way. Now, I propose, since most inmates are very young, guys like me are unusual in prison. I believe we should put them through basic training. We should take retired, by the way, I'm a Navy veteran, so I want to make that clear. We should take retired DIs or drill instructors or whatever they call it in the Air Force or whatever, and put these guys, these young men, through basically basic training. Because once they accomplish it, it'll be the first time in their life they ever finished anything hard and meaningful. And anyone who's gone through basic training will tell you, when you're done with it, no matter how much you didn't like it, it does feel great when you're marching on that field. And I propose we do exactly the same thing with their families. We put these kids, and if they do something bad, they have to start over again. That's the punishment.
Yeah.
And
so you're talking, right, I agree. Separate those who can be reformed from those who can't be.
It's easy.
And put them away. And you know what?
It's the
death penalty. I'm sorry, the death penalty is biblical. Genesis 9:6, Numbers 35:30, Leviticus 24:17.
I have to be honest, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I'm opposed to the death penalty. And the reason I am is very simple. There is absolutely no doubt that we've executed innocent people over the years.
And I support the Innocence Project.
Now, when we legalize drugs and we've cut prison costs by 80%, we'll have plenty of money to lock up murderers for life without parole, which is a much worse punishment than death for these guys. What you have to understand is they're not afraid of dying, but at the very same time, there's been enough exonerations, enough DNA evidence, enough things coming forward later when we find out. And for every person we exonerate, there are going to be 10 more we never found out and were put to death.
Yeah, well, that goes back to there's no such thing as perfect. There's going to be collateral damage.
So let's lock them up.
Controversial for me, like along the lines you're saying, like get a lot of pushback. Russia does this right. Israel does this right. Between junior high and high school, all our kids should get 6 months military boot camp. Actually,
as part of the 1964 plan, I advocate national service.
I forgot to unplug the phone again. Yeah.
Okay, don't even worry about it. One of the white papers in there is on national service. I believe that every 18-year-old in the country, without exception, no waivers, no educational deferments, no nothing. Everyone goes into 2 years of national service. Now, you can choose military or non-military. We could take the Peace Corps, make it paramilitary, structure it like a military with ranks and everything else, but they just do social work and building and go around the world and do whatever they do. Or they can go into the military, but you're going to serve 2 years.
They're taught structure, respect, discipline, nothing that they get in the indoctrination factories today.
But back in, I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I didn't go to Vietnam. I want to make that clear. I was in the service at the time. I was a Russian linguist. I was nowhere near Vietnam, so I don't want to mislead anybody. But I knew a lot of Vietnam veterans, a lot. And let me tell you, mostly they came from poor families because the rich kids got educational deferments and they pulled strings. I'm for national service without exception. Rich, poor, or middle class, white, black, it doesn't matter. You're going to do your 2 years of mandatory national service. It won't kill you. You'll go to college as a freshman at 21 when you're going to be much more mature, much more appreciative of what. And most people, that's another subject, but not everybody should be going to college. There are lots of careers that you can do without 4 years of college, but that's another story. I'm not really that's not part of the 1964 plan. That was me riffing, but. All of those parts that we're talking about, drug legalization, reforming the prisons, ending the federal welfare state, doing away with no-fault divorce, mandatory national service, that's all part of and it's a holistic plan to return our culture to what it was in 1964, not to turn the clock back. That's not what I'm saying. Because I picked that year for the Civil Rights Act. No discrimination. Keep the best of what we've done and restore the best of what we had.
Amen.
And at the core of that is the traditional nuclear family. And by the way, you should get married young. This nonsense. One of the reasons women are so unhappy is that they put off their marriage for careers, then they find themselves at 30 and having a hard time getting pregnant, or even finding a man. They keep, this man's got this, and you got to get married young. You got to get, I'm sorry, that's the way you're designed as a being. The reason as a teenager that you're randy all the time is God talking to you saying, reproduce yourself. So you should fall in love with the girl. You should marry that girl.
Yeah.
You should get an education and a job. You should stay married. You should raise your children together. And we should not be embarrassed to say that. That is an objective reality. There's a mountain of data to support that. A mountain. There's so many studies.
I agree with you. It's just that now that we live longer has complicated all that. And people think,
but the birth cycle isn't longer.
Off. Right.
You can't put off having a baby. And I'm not going to get into abortion, although my personal opinion is at conception is a human being. But that's just neither here nor there. Okay, so, and I knew that you'd like that, but I'm not going to discuss abortion. That's a political issue, and I don't want to get into that. But having said all of that, we're about to have a historic opportunity because my background is heavily financial, and I'm going to tell you something. We are at the edge of the end financially. We're going to wake up one morning very soon, and you're going to see the stock market collapse, the banks collapse, real estate collapse. Everything is going to collapse. We have built, not just us, not just the United States, the entire world is built on fiat currency.
Yep.
Money printed out of thin air without value.
Yep.
Our destiny was sown in 1971 when Richard Nixon withdrew us from the Bretton Woods Agreement. That's when we went off the tracks. President Biden lit a bigger fire under it. And the reason is he used the dollar as a weapon against Russia in this Ukraine thing. Now, I'm not going to get into whether we should be in Ukraine or not, but I'll tell you as a Russian linguist, we should not be anywhere near Ukraine. Having said that, I mean, if you understand the history there, you would not be involved. And I speak fluent Russian and I understand Ukrainian, and I'm just telling you, that was a horrible mistake. But the worst mistake was taking the dollar away from the Russians, weaponizing the dollar. We made a promise in 1948 to the world that if they used the dollar as the world reserve currency, we would never weaponize it. And we never did. We never stopped the Chinese from doing it. We never stopped the Russians from using it. We never stopped the Saudis. But Joe Biden, in his senility, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm an old guy, I know what senility looks like, so do you. That's senility, has weaponized the dollar. That has lit a fire under the entire world economy, and it's all going to come crashing down.
And now we got RICS, and the U.S., the House, I keep saying, needs to at least begin a 10, 20-year plan to get us back to standardized currency. At least a plan. But we are clowered and pivoted into bankruptcy and collapse.
The only way through this is the hard way. I'm sorry, it's too late to stop it. The hard way and the right way are exactly the same thing. And what's going to happen now is we're going to have a total economic collapse. 2008 is going to seem like a party compared to what's coming. The Great Depression will look like the easiest time in history compared to what's coming. What's coming is the worst economic collapse in the history of the world. I know that sounds hysterical. I could go into the reasons why, but that's not what I'm here. You can believe it or not, but you're going to wake up one morning soon. And then what happens then is the radical becomes reasonable when the poop hits the fan. Okay, so all these ideas that I'm talking about are radical in a conventional world. Okay, so all I'm trying to do now is build support of people who see it, volunteers, raise some money, pressure politicians, yada, yada. But when the collapse comes, that's when the moment comes that we can fix it all. But there will be evil people out there. There will be demagogues. There will be people who will try to use the exact same crisis to do evil things. So we have to have a track to run on, a structure, a program, a plan, not propaganda. Not, we have to, we got to stop that. Yeah. But today, the 1964 plan couldn't possibly be made law. But when the crash comes, and it's not an if, it's a when. It's either going to, I personally don't believe we'll get to the next election without the collapse. I think it's sometime before. I actually would not be surprised to see it happen before the end of this year. It will certainly happen early next year. And when it does, suddenly this is going to seem like the smartest thing anybody's ever heard, because we're going to be like, what do we do now? You cannot build a solid structure on a foundation of sand. Okay, well, actually, you can. I built on sand in Mexico. That's a bad analogy, but actually, sand is one of the best things to build on because it really doesn't settle like regular. But anyway, that's another story. That's my defending background. But the point is, you have to have a strong foundation on your house. You can't have a house without a foundation. And what I'm talking about, the restoration of the traditional family, is the foundation of our entire culture. Period. End of story. Whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Muslim, whether you're an atheist. And that's why I built in the 4 pillars of Stoicism, because people have to have a philosophy to cling on to. And if they're not, I think a lot of people will come back to church when this happens. But for those that don't, we have to have a guiding philosophy, not just you got to be better. Justice, wisdom, moderation, and courage.
Okay.
And objective reality.
We are way
I know.
over. I'm going to just say one thing about Ukraine. What you said from a historical basis, I understand. However, the fact and reality is, whether people like it or not, Bill Clinton made the deal with Ukraine. You give up your nukes, regardless of whether you're part of NATO.
It doesn't matter. No one's keeping agreements.
Your protector.
Look, the military-industrial complex in this country that Eisenhower warned about is real. Yeah. We have been in a state of war since the end of the Second World War. We have fought a consistent series of small wars, running up our $32 trillion deficit along with what the welfare state costs. And let me tell you something, that party has to come to an end. We had an historic chance in 1990 when the Soviet Union fell, and we couldn't take yes for an answer. Russia is an historic ally of the United States. People don't understand that. Prior to the Communist Revolution, Russia was our ally since the founding. Tsar Alexander I was a supporter of the American Revolution, believe it or not. Russia helped the early Americans. Russia is not our natural enemy. We had a chance to make friends with them, and we couldn't take yes for an answer.
Yeah.
NATO should have been dissolved right there. There was no reason for it. We should have embraced the Russians, and nothing like this would have happened.
Yeah, Russian people are not our enemy. The current Russian leaders are. And with that, we're going to let
another day.
Yeah, let people know where to find all the rest of the information. Then we're hitting stop.
You got to spell it out. The1964plan.org. Go there. You'll find all of the background. I know I talk too much, but you'll enjoy the white papers. They don't go on for 800 pages. They go on for like 6. Okay, so don't worry. I'm not telling you to go read a novel. Then, if you feel motivated, the most important thing you can do is volunteer, and there's a way to do that on the website. And also, yes, we'd like you to donate. All donations are tax deductible. It's up to you. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Please do, but remember, I'm not involved with the money, just to be very clear. And that's it. That's all I have to add.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I don't like the begging part either. But I have to close with yes, please like and share. The only way the show grows is if you like and share. And yes, please help keep the show on the air. Please subscribe. I hate to do that. I don't want to do that. I am annoyed at all the damn YouTube videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. But yes, this one time, that's
the algorithm. We live in a world of algorithms. And the last point I'd make is, if we don't restore the nuclear family, with the way technology is going so fast, without a foundation, it's going to destroy us.
Yeah.
AI will destroy us without a foundation of values.
Thank you, Herbie Kay, not of Kay Jewelers, for coming on. Appreciate having you. Take care. God bless, brother.
Joe, thanks for having me. It's been nothing but a pleasure. And thank you to everybody watching. Have a beautiful day. God bless America.